Welcome to 20th Century Music and Arts. In this episode, we are going to continue looking at the career of one Glenn Danzig. We're going to see what his career was like after the Misfits. Samhain is an ancient Celtic holiday that was celebrated, and still is, in Ireland, Scotland, and on the Isle of Man. It is a holiday, traditionally, that marked the end of the harvest season, and often involved sacrificing a cow and drinking excessive amounts of mead. It marked the halfway point between the summer equinox and winter solstice. It was this pagan holiday that would provide the name for Danzig's next band. Now, somewhere in the process, the band started pronouncing it Samhain, or at least the fans did, and because it was kind of easier to say it that way, the name stayed around. Glenn had become interested in creating music that was different from the punk sound of the Misfits. After the sheer heaviness of the thrashcore, hardcore sound of Earth AD, Danzig wanted to create a more diverse sounding band, and he wanted to incorporate several different genres. Now, in the early 80s, there were numerous bands on both sides of the Atlantic playing kind of a goth rock or death rock style, and these included bands like Bauhaus, Specimen, Alien Sex Fiend, 45 Grade, and Christian Death. Even the punk rock band TSOL was embracing the style. Glenn was particularly influenced by Bauhaus and Alien Sex Fiend, and he wanted to merge those sounds with a heavier punk and even metal sound. Danzig wanted to explore darker themes, and he dropped the sort of B-movie themes of the Misfits. He wanted lyrics about demons, creatures, and paganism. Glenn talked to former Misfits photographer and Rosemary Baby's drummer, Eerie Vaughn, about forming a band. Eerie soon realized that he wasn't cutting it as a drummer, so Glenn suggested that he play bass. Steve Zing, who had played in the band's Morning Noise and in Bobby Steele's The Undead, was brought in as the drummer, and Lyle Pressler, who had been the guitarist for the hardcore band Minor Threat, was brought in as the final member. Glenn started working on Samhain's first album in August 1983, and in fact at that time the Misfits were still together. However, most of the recording was done in 1984, and Lyle only ended up playing on 3 tracks on the album. In fact, Glenn ended up playing a lot of the guitar on the album. The album was released in August 1984 on Plan 9 and was mostly recorded at Real Platinum Studios in Lodi, New Jersey. The album's title, Initium, which stands for Latin for rebirth. This sound was a departure from the Misfits, but still had Glenn's strong sense of melody. The album starts with a weird soundscape. It was actually recorded at Eerie Vaughn's house, with Glenn giving a monologue like he is a demonic spirit come to the earth, before it goes right into the track Saw When, which Glenn pronounces correctly, and it has kind of a heavy gothic guitar and lyrics that reference that pagan holiday. Do you want The vibe continues in the same manner in Black Dream, which is about the temptations of a succubus. That's a female demon that has sexual intercourse with men. Keyboards create ambience in the song as well. All Murder, All Guts, All Fun harkens back to the dark humor of the Misfits. Macabre is an intense dialogue, and He Who Cannot Be Named continues this upbeat pace. Now, side 2 starts out with a new version of the Misfits track Horror Business, which was just shortened to Horror Biz. This version has a more menacing guitar sound than the original. Lycanthropy gets referenced on both the Shift and the Howl, and the Howl has particularly some amazing tribal drums. The album closes with Archangel. Much of that track had been recorded back in 1981. Though the production is not excellent, the album's unique sound was really like anything coming out at that time. Though it referenced goth, punk, and metal, it was not 100% in any of those genres. What certainly must have grabbed people's attention was the shocking front cover. Eerie, Glenn, and Steve Zing are standing shirtless with devil hairdos and are completely covered in blood. Apparently it was real horse blood, and the photo was taken in Glenn's basement. Blood would become a big part of the Samhain stage shows. Presler did not really seem to want to be part of Samhain and the New Jersey scene, so he went back to Washington. Pete Damian Marshall was brought in to play guitar. The band went on tour in the autumn of 1984, and the tour was called the Season of the Dead Tour. The next recording that the band put together was the Unholy Passion EP. It opens with Unholy Passion, which is about sexual intercourse. The tone of the track is very menacing with its dirgy guitars, chiming keyboard effects, and tribal drums. A heavier interpretation of the sort of goth sound that was happening at places like the Batcave is what you really hear on that track. Next is All Hell, which again is another reworking of a Misfits song. This time it's the reworking All Hell Breaks Loose. Again, though, it's got that dark Samhain sound. The driving morbid bun follows. The Hungry End continues the intensity with noisy staccato guitars. It is like a metallic post-punk from the hardcore punk underground. There's a series of morbid screams and howls that make up Misery Tomb. This sound is quite unnerving, something out of a horror movie. Then the album ends with I Am Misery, which imagines the concept or idea of misery as a physical entity. Track sounds like Bauhaus on steroids with drippings of rudimentary peni. What Danzig had done with Samhain was create a unique, eerie sound world that evoked demonic imagery and pure rage. There was a tour for the Unholy Passion EP from February 19th, 1985 to May 19th, 1985. On stage, Danzig would come out with a devil mask that had horns on it, and at other times they come on stage completely covered in blood. And Danzig actually picked up guitar for the track Archangel. Now, Samhain used this dead cow kind of style, and it was originally drawn by Michael Golden for the Marvel comic Crystar. The font for the name Samhain was taken from the 1959 film The Giant Gila Monster. Steve Zing would leave, and eventually London May was brought in as the drummer. But Danzig would end up playing drums on half the tracks on Samhain 3, November Coming Fire. This album was recorded between June and August 1985 at the Real Platinum Studios in Lodi, New Jersey. This album is one of the masterpieces, in my opinion, of that 80s underground scene. It starts out with the atmospheric instrumental Diablos 88, which again has tribal drums and a horror movie kind of soundtrack keyboard thing happening. Think kind of John Carpenter. This is quickly followed by the charging In My Grip. The heavy plodding yet melodic Mother of Mercy is next. Birthright is chaotic and sinister with keyboard effects imitating bells. An album highlight is the very sparse, kind of epic ballad To Walk the Night. Danzig's croons create a kind of goth anthem for the alienated and dispossessed.
To walk the night.
The ripping Let the Day Begin shows the bands they still have that punk rock intensity that they had in the Misfits. And again, a new version of the Misfits song is given the Samhain treatment. Lyrics, with the exception of the chorus, are in Latin, and the track there would be Halloween 2. The album title track was a favorite of James Hetfield of Metallica, that being November Coming Fire. The album closes with 3 excellent tracks: Kiss of Steel, Unbridled, and Human Pony Girl. The band was expanding their fan base and were definitely attracting both metal fans and goth fans as well. The members of Metallica were championing both Samhain and the Misfits, and could often be seen wearing shirts by both those bands. The band toured from October 1985, prior to the album's release, to May 1986. They played with a variety of underground punk, alternative rock, and metal acts, including Green River, the Minutemen, Faith No More, Dag Nasty, UK Subs, and the metal band Rigor Mortis. They had their last concert as part of the New Music Seminar at the Ritz in New York on July 14th, 1986. The bill had the Cheetah Chrome MFers, Rogue Mail, Nuclear Assault, MDC, DOA, and Celtic Frost headlining. In the audience was the owner and producer at Def Jam Records, Rick Rubin. He recognized the talent that Danzig had. Rubin was famous for producing hip-hop acts like Run DMC, LL Cool J, and the Beastie Boys, but he was also responsible for producing Slayer's thrash metal classic 1986's Rain and Blood. Rick wanted to sign Glenn and his band to the label, but he wanted Glenn to be surrounded by high-quality musicians. However, Glenn only agreed to be signed if Eerie Von came along. So it was Eerie and Glenn as a band, but new members were needed. In 1987, Canadian drummer Chuck Montgomery, aka Chuck Biscuits, was brought on board. Biscuits was the drummer that Glenn wanted and admired. He admired his playing in Black Flag and the Circle Jerks. Filthy Animal Tailors of Motorhead would have been Glenn's other choice if Biscuits wasn't available. After numerous auditions, John Wolfgang Knoll was considered to be a possible guitarist. John kept leaving endless guitar solos on Glenn's answering machine until he was given the gig. John was a virtuoso and very much came from the rock and metal world. He shared an apartment with Biscuits, and they came out with the new stage name, John Von Christ, and then it was shortened to John Christ, as there was already an Eerie Von in the band. Glenn was given an opportunity to play on the soundtrack for the 1987 film, Less Than Zero. He composed the song You and Me, and it was played by his new band, except for Eerie, who could not play the bass properly, so producer George Draculius played instead. This song sounds like an homage to Elvis and all the crooners of yesteryear that had influenced Danzig, and had a string orchestra sound on it as well. This might have been influenced by the special opportunity that Glenn had on the album. Rubin knew Roy Orbison, who was one of Glenn's idols, and presented the Fame singer with a song Glenn had written called Life Fades Away. Orbison liked the song, and he worked with Glenn in the studio learning the song. Danzig was in awe of Orbison's ability to fill up the room with his voice.
Life fades away. The night is my day.
Both of these songs appeared on the soundtrack and highlighted Glenn's ability to create melancholy ballads. Glenn was writing material and still wanted to finish up some of the Samhain material, but Rubin suggested that Glenn renamed the band under his own name. So the name Danzig was born, and the band would sign to Rubin's new label, Def American, in 1988. He also suggested a change of direction. Rubin had produced the goth rock band The Cult's 1987 album Electric. Rubin injected the influence of bands like AC/DC and Led Zeppelin into the Cult sound and opened them up to a new audience. Rubin wanted to take a similar approach to Danzig. Glenn was a huge fan of Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath, and with a capable guitar player like John Christ, he could certainly play around with these influences. So out went the tribal drums and noisy guitars, and in came a stripped down hard rock sound, and all the members, they grew out their hair. This was biker rock with a vocalist indebted to Elvis and Jim Morrison. But the subject matter was still similar to Samhain. Glenn dealt with dark, violent themes and referenced similar satanic and pagan concepts that were sung about in underground metal bands. This sound and concepts placed the band in a unique position. They would have punk fans from the Misfits days, goth fans from the Samhain days, hard rock fans who enjoyed the classic rock, and metal fans who liked the extreme imagery and subject matter. After several recording sessions between September 1987 and April 1988, Danzig's self-titled debut was released on August 30th, 1988. The band's sound is sparse, heavy blues rock, with Danzig's vocals right front and center. The opening track, Twist of Cain, references the biblical tale of Cain and Abel and deals with the impulses that can drive a person to murder. It was originally a Samhain song, and James Hetfield of Metallica came in and did backing vocals, but he could not be credited due to contract disputes. The heavy charging sound of Not of This World continues with this heavy blues onslaught. The sleazy drum beat of She Rides is next, and directly references the demon Lilith, who was banished from the Garden of Eden. This song is a pure stripper anthem, and the video for this song shows how these kinds of dancers could really move with this song. Soul on Fire starts with Danzig's soft vocals, but before driving straight back into the heavy blues rock. Samhain, or Samhain, is actually pronounced properly here. Side 1 ends with the pulverizing Am I Demon. Danzig proposes that those who claim to be morally virtuous never look in the mirror at their own actions. Side 2 starts with Mother, a song that would end up being Danzig's most famous. The lyrics are a direct attack on the censorship of rock music that was being promoted by the Parents Music Resource Center. The video shows Danzig sacrificing a chicken over a bikini-clad woman. The blood was actually chocolate sauce, and there were in fact no chickens harmed in the video. Backwards piano gives an eerie sound to Possession, another song written in the Samhain era. End of Time starts out with an anonymous melody before the blues rock sets in. Looks outside, follows me home. The Hunter is actually a semi-cover of a Booker T and MG song sung by the bluesman Albert King that had been previously plagiarized by Led Zeppelin on their song How Many More Times. And then the album ends with the angry, evil thing. I serve my perdition in this private hell. 1,000 angers have kept me alive. I cannot emphasize how much of an impact this made on the 16, 17-year-old version of myself. I used to play this album every day for a few months, and it became the link between the classic rock world and the 80s underground I was discovering. I had an interest in martial arts and lifting weights, and Glenn himself had become quite an avid bodybuilder. His size had increased, and in fact, some speculated he might have done a couple of cycles of steroids. Danzig would go on tour throughout the end of 1988 and all through 1989. The band opened up for both Metallica and Slayer, and the band would tour smaller venues with all kinds of different bands opening, including Gwar, Sick of It All, Mudhoney, Carnivore, White Zombie, King Horse, and Circus of Power. Danzig did relent and made an edited version of the Mother video. The people at MTV showed the original version by accident. Even though it got numerous requests from fans to air the video, it was pulled from rotation. So the band released a VHS tape in 1990 to escape the censorship, and it included videos for Am I Demon, Twist of Cain, She Rides, and Mother, along with backstage footage and various interviews, mostly with Glenn, but with the other band members as well. Glenn introduces everyone to his book collection and shows the viewer a book called The Werewolf by Montague Summers, which Glenn claims is full of werewolf stories that are all documented, all true.
The Werewolf by Montague Summers. This is great. There's lots of great werewolf stories in here, all documented, all true.
Danzig and the band would go back to the studio to do their follow-up, Danzig 2, Lucifuge. The name means to flee the light in Latin. The album was recorded between June 1989 and May 1990 in 2 different studios in Hollywood. The band now lived in LA, which was ironic because Glenn had stated in earlier interviews he would never want to live in that city. Rick Rubin was less involved in the production, and while Danzig's voice was still front and center, the band's sound was definitely turned up in the mix as well. There is a development in the instrumentation and the songwriting on the album. The album, with Glenn's enlarged face next to smaller images of the 3 band members, recalls the debut album by The Doors. The album has an overall blues vibe to the sound. The album starts out with dive bomb guitars before leading on to a full charge with the track Long Way Back from Hell. The next song is Snake of Christ, with its falling guitar that has some similarities to the Kiss song War Machine, but definitely would be ripped off later by Stone Temple Pilots in their track Sex Type Thing. Heavy blues song Killer Wolf that has a backdoor man concept of the many traditional blues songs is what follows. Then there's the driving riff of Tired of Being Alive. An acoustic Mississippi blues style number called I'm the One is after that. Finally, finishing up side 1 is the epic Her Black Wings.
Like a silver black, talk of the night, come to me, my bleeding light.
Side 1 of this album has no filler. Side 2 starts out with the broken chords of Devil's Plaything, but it does not take long before the heaviness comes back in. 777 has incredible use of slide guitars. Glenn is back to his 50s style crooning on the ballad Blood and Tears. Girl is a kind of throwaway rocker, and the album closes with the eerie, almost Doors-like Pain in the World.
Full of hell.
Glenn and the band had produced another solid album. They toured with Corrosion of Conformity and Soundgarden opening. I bought tickets for the Toronto show, but concert got cancelled when Eerie Von was stopped at the border with some green smokable stuff. They came back a few months later, and I did see that show, with the Christian doom metal band Trouble opening. Trouble was also on the label Deaf American. They would do various other shows. They played with Bad Brains in Europe, and they even opened up for the Pixies in one German show. Glenn was starting to make a decent living, and was still in control of his musical vision. Tune in next week to see where Glenn takes the band and the other artistic projects that he will get involved in. Thank you for watching 20th Century Music and Arts. Please like, share, subscribe, and name any Danzig songs that are your favorite. Thank you.